When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
If it's important to our nation,
I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
It's on Face the Nation.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan.
We're ready to move past the stale ideas and faded names of the past. I am running for President of the United States of America.
Haley enters a fluid and soon-to-be growing field.
There's new information about the Chinese spy balloon that the U.S. military shot down off the Atlantic coast.
I can see like lines coming down below, but I can't see anything below it. Definitely smaller than a car.
I think the administration has undermined its own credibility.
It's no time for premature partisanship. We need to work together in Congress to get to the bottom of what happened.
South Carolina will be a big part of this show because South Carolina will be pivotal in next year's presidential campaign. And South Carolina, like America, has complicated history. Of course, Native Americans were there first hundreds and hundreds of years before the first Europeans. The Spaniards arrived in the 16th century, then came the French. The English were the first to colonize it, naming it, believe it or not, after King Charles I. Then came the War for American Independence, and in that war, 1/3 of the battles were fought in South Carolina, more than any other state at that time. Of course, decades later, South Carolina became the first state to secede from the Union, setting in motion the Civil War. Then decades after that, much of the South was struggling, sometimes violently, with civil rights and their evolution. South Carolina comparatively had less strife, evolving gradually, which brings us to today, when the first female governor of South Carolina, the first governor from South Carolina of Asian American descent, Nikki Haley, announced her candidacy for the presidency. As I said, history can be complicated, evolving, and fascinating. Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. We thank you for joining us. As I said, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley campaigned in her home state of South Carolina today after officially entering the 2024 presidential race. Haley is the first candidate to declare a run after former President Trump announced his campaign. CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa is in Charleston, South Carolina. Robert, Nikki Haley is in. What is her lane?
Major, it's good to be with you here in Charleston, South Carolina. Former Ambassador Nikki Haley is someone who is still to be determined in terms of where she fits inside of the Republican Party. She was elected in 2010 as part of the Tea Party wave, then was someone who campaigned for Mitt Romney, a favorite of the Republican establishment in 2012. And then she campaigned against Trump in 2016, at least early on, endorsing Senator Marco Rubio's campaign back then. Ultimately, of course, she joined the Trump administration, serving as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. So she has drifted politically inside the Republican Party as it has transformed. And we saw in her announcement speech earlier today an attempt to try to appeal to all wings of the Republican Party. She expressed grievance on the cultural front, talked about education, so she's competing for that conservative base on those issues. She also brought up traditional Republican issues like the economy and taxes, and she took shots at President Biden. So she is casting herself as someone who is a new generational leader, her words, for the Republican Party, and trying to see if she can consolidate support not in a particular political lane or political space, but by trying to pull all the threads together into her candidacy.
And Robert, you had a chance to talk to some voters, I believe, either before or after the announcement. What kind of reaction have you gauged there in Charleston, South Carolina?
Major, they know her here in South Carolina. She was elected governor in 2010, reelected in 2014. She is someone who has a base in this key early voting state, but at the same time, she's not the only name in South Carolina that's going to matter in 2024. Former President Donald Trump already in the race, won South Carolina in 2016, of course, won it again in 2020 without any opposition. And he is someone who commands real support in this state even now, has the endorsement of Senator Lindsey Graham, has the endorsement of the incumbent governor, Henry McMaster. So Haley enters a crowded South Carolina political race as she enters the race, though she is the first person to enter the race against Trump nationally. there's an expectation that South Carolina will be tough for her and any others that try to compete with Trump, and that the field nationally will be pretty big. And that's why her allies and advisors tell us she wanted to get in now to at least have a little bit of time to have a head-to-head contest against Donald Trump.
And it's always a question for the early announced candidates. Are you running a regional race, meaning in one state or one region, or are you trying to actually build a national campaign? Does Nikki Haley, based on the advisors you've talked to, Robert, have intentions to be a regular presence in Iowa and New Hampshire, as well as South Carolina?
She certainly does. In fact, Major, from here in South Carolina, she is scheduled to go to New Hampshire, then to Iowa. So she's trying to build a national coalition of support. What's going to be something to watch is how do Trump voters respond to her? Trump supporters here in South Carolina and in those other early voting states. Do they see her as anti-Trump, muddled on Trump, pro-Trump, someone who could be the Trump standard bearer for that movement? Should she win the nomination, he lose it? She is someone who has shifted on Trump over the years, and she has not fully explained where exactly she lands on the Trump question and on things like former President Trump's conduct with regard to the 2020 election. He continues to claim falsely that that election was stolen. Where does she land on that? She's trying to clearly build her own campaign with her own message, not go head-to-head with Trump in a direct way, but she's doing it in a veiled way so far early on, talking about this generational shift she wants to see.
And Robert, as you know, there's always a certain amount of delicacy about when you announce your campaign, because one of the first things that will be judged after your announcement is how well do you fundraise. She's clearly announcing her race, or her candidacy, in the first quarter of this year, which means there's going to be an assessment at the end of the first quarter on fundraising. What do her advisors think about that? Do they have an internal goal there? And will she also have a super PAC to amplify her message once this national campaign gets up and running?
Well, part of her getting in early is to try to generate those low-dollar donations, not just get the big-dollar donations, because some of those big-dollar donors, as you know, Major, they're waiting to see whether Florida Governor Ron DeSantis gets into this race, how Trump does. So it's really a wait-and-see moment for many major donors at this point. Some of them certainly could sign on to Haley, but some of them are also looking at other South Carolina potential contenders like Senator Tim Scott, who is going to have a big event here in Charleston tomorrow, another sign that he is potentially moving toward his own 2024 bid. And so the real test for her in this coming quarter will be, can she generate enthusiasm with those low-dollar donors who are watching this activity, watching her announcement, maybe paying attention to her online videos as she announced yesterday, and see if she can create her own mark and a space in the Republican Party that gives her a political identity. Though it remains, again, to be seen what she's running for in terms of policy. She's running against the Biden agenda and the Biden presidency, to be sure. But in terms of foreign policy, yes, she's critical of Iran. She's critical of other typical U.S. adversaries. But she is seen largely as a hawk. I'm going to be watching how she handles the issue of Ukraine, especially in the coming months. So she called for more funding for fighter jets to be sent over to that war-torn country.
Robert Costa for us in Charleston, South Carolina. Thank you very much. Two Republicans have now officially declared their candidacy for president, but plenty of others are making moves. Today, former Vice President Mike Pence and former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson visited the first in the nation caucus state of Iowa. Hutchinson traveled to the Hawkeye State today to meet with state officials and Republican activists. The vocal Trump critic said he will make a decision in the next 2 months. Pence, by the way, was in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, talking about a topic Republicans have already made central to their 2024 election discussions: parental rights and education.
So I am here to say, on behalf of families in Iowa and on behalf of conservative organizations who are fighting this in court today, we are going to defend parents' rights and the children of Iowa and America.
Joining me now here at the desk, CBS News political director Finn Gomez. Finn, we'll get to Pence and Hutchinson in a minute, but Nikki Haley announced today.
Yeah.
So she's in. And there was a quick response from former President Trump. We'll also get to that in a second. But what I want to play for you and our audience is kind of a mashup of Nikki Haley on her relationship to former President Trump and the idea of running. Let's listen to that.
Donald Trump has always put America first.
and he has earned 4 more years as president. What President Trump did, to his great credit, was recognize a reality that American presidents had denied for too long.
Does everybody like Nikki? Because if you don't like Nikki, otherwise she could easily be replaced, right?
I'm not running for 2020. I can promise you what I'll be doing is campaigning for this one. Claims to be worth a certain amount of money and for some reason is not showing us his tax returns because we don't think he's actually worth as much as he says he is. I would not run if President Trump ran. I'm Nikki Haley, and I'm running for president.
So, there's a bit of variety there, wouldn't you say, Finn?
Sure, yeah. She formerly was supportive of the president. Even before that, if you go back to 2016, she supported Marco Rubio
in South
Carolina, right? And then during the general election, of course, backed former President Donald Trump in that election. So she saw it back and forth. But now, obviously, she's the first candidate, first rival to Donald
former
Trump.
President Trump. And
right.
I'm sure this caught your ear in the announcement speech today, Finn Gomez. Nikki Haley said that if she were elected president, she would advocate for a mental competency test for any political candidate over the age of 75. As you and I both know, Donald Trump is 76. That's not so veiled a reference to mental competency, is it?
No, that is directed at Donald Trump, and it is directed at President Biden, who's 80 years old as well. I mean, and it also taps into what we're seeing in both parties, this bit
push
of
for
momentum,
generational change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what was the reaction, and how long did it take for former President Trump to weigh in on Nikki Haley's announcement?
Not long.
Like 30 seconds or something?
Maybe 29 seconds. Yeah, it was quick. They were ready for it, and they proceeded on, not only on his social media platform, but, his surrogates and email, putting out statements criticizing Haley and her 1% that he highlighted.
1% in the polls, implying
yeah.
she's an establishment Republican. And also I saw notably, because this was a big issue in 2016 in South Carolina among those Republican voters, soft on immigration.
Yes, absolutely. It is a red meat issue for that state, and you'll be hearing a lot from Republicans. And yeah, I mean, this is a clear broadside, and it's going to get worse.
So we had references to former Vice President Pence and former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, both looking at this, both testing the waters, if you will, in Iowa. We probably expect both of them to get in, do we not, at some point in the not-too-distant future?
At this point, yes. And frankly, I mean, that is the expectation. They have not declared. There's a couple steps they have to take, of course. And they may be running into each other. I mean, they're very similar in on their platforms and as potential candidates. So that could be an issue. And Iowa is important to both those potential candidacies as well, as it is to Haley as also.
Very good.
Yeah.
Finn Gomez, thank you very much.
Good to be on, Major.
The Senate receives a classified briefing on China, what we know about that meeting and what it may mean for America's relationship with China. You are streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming racism.
I feel like it's just a war zone between all different races.
Will this generation continue the problem?
The kids pushed them away and didn't want them to be there because of their race.
Or be the solution?
We just need to keep raising our voices. We're all human and we don't deserve that type of treatment just because of how we look.
Are the kids all right? Racism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme, CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real, you'll have time to get prepared. Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings.
An original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
The news doesn't have to always be depressing.
What do you love about running?
It can be uplifting. That human connection that we create on the broadcast every night is incredibly important.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett. Senators received a classified briefing on China today amid new revelations about the spy balloon shot down earlier this month. CBS News has learned U.S. intelligence officials tracked that balloon from liftoff in mainland China. Lawmakers from both parties have called on the Biden administration for more transparency about that balloon and 3 other aerial objects recently shot down. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins us now. Nicole, I want to play for you some sound from earlier today from Montana Democratic Senator Jon Tester. We are told that the White House is considering a speech from the president on this topic, and Senator Tester was asked if that was a good idea. Let's you and I both listen.
I think that's up to the president. I think that there's more information out there to be gathered. And when that information is gathered to a point, he'll address it. But I think it's important that we deal with facts and what that balloon was doing and the kind of information it was potentially getting. And so that's going to take a little bit of time. You know, would it hurt for him to go on TV and make a speech to the people? That never hurts.
Nicole, it sounds to me like a Democrat nudging the president to say more. Is that what you're hearing?
Well, that's certainly been what we've heard from a number of lawmakers throughout the week. As you know, there wasn't just this hearing today with respect to China, but there was also one yesterday specifically on some of these flying objects that were recently shot down following that surveillance balloon. And of course, we know senators also were briefed separately on that balloon earlier this month. So there have been a number of briefings here on Capitol Hill. And yes, many lawmakers do feel the president should say more on this issue, but they also think he should do so once we have more information, not only about the surveillance balloon, but about these objects, which, of course, officials and authorities are still gathering.
And, Nicole, is there a consensus on the Hill about how dangerous this is or isn't in terms of these aerial objects?
Well, certainly I can say coming out of this China hearing this afternoon, there was a lot of sober language. And keep in mind, this was a broader briefing about, the implications of the U.S. and China relations vis-a-vis our defense and national security and our, geopolitical posture. So this was kind of more of a broad-ranging briefing. But many senators did walk out of there really concerned about some of the threats potentially that China may pose against the United States, not only just from a defense posture, but also from an economic and strategic posture as well, and really stressing the need for the United States to continue to be aggressive as it relates to kind of this strategic competition and and this very tense relationship between the U.S. and China right now. But that being said, with respect to the balloon and with respect to some of these objects, again, what lawmakers have said is that, at least as far as the objects are concerned, they don't think that poses a lot of danger to the American public based on what they've heard right now. Their understanding is that, some of these items are still being retrieved. And as far as a balloon is concerned, obviously we're still learning more about the evidence that was gathered there. So lawmakers just want to make sure that the Biden administration is being as transparent as possible. So these briefings, while helpful, certainly haven't answered all of their questions.
And Nicole, briefly, the administration has said that there was sort of a gap in awareness about these aerial objects, balloons and otherwise, mostly balloons. Do lawmakers find that a credible explanation for why we are seeing more visibility and action than we did previously?
Well, it is kind of an interesting dynamic here because on one hand, one thing that I heard from many lawmakers over the last day or two with respect to these objects is that there should be a better protocol because, as you know, there were about 3 objects that were shot down following this balloon. But yet you'll recall many lawmakers said that the balloon, when that was discovered, should have been taken down sooner. So it's kind of like you can't have it both ways. And lawmakers do feel that there needs to be a better process going forward in terms of how we handle these types of encounters, because obviously there are the balloons, but there are also these unidentified flying objects that have existed for years now. And so lawmakers do want a consistent way of handling those going forward.
Nicole Killian, thank you so very much.
You bet.
Earlier, I spoke with former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton. Mr. Ambassador, thanks for joining us. On the aerial objects, meaning the balloons, Chinese and otherwise, from your vantage point, sir, what's missing from the Biden administration in terms of explanation and action?
Well, I think looking at the first balloon, the Chinese balloon, I think it's been a record of failure to deal with what should have been treated as a very serious potential threat to the country. And I think they didn't act early enough. They allowed the balloon to come across the country, even despite press reports that we knew the balloon had lifted off of Hainan Island in China a week before they said that it was spotted north of the Aleutians. So it's very hard to understand what their rationale has been. We've heard shifting narratives of what actually happened, shifting grounds for their decisions. And then after that story seemed to be finished, we had 3 new objects that were shot down, despite having been told earlier that that was dangerous. So I think the administration has undermined its own credibility. And from what I see from multiple congressional briefings now, the sentiment in Congress seems to be they're not hearing anything new from the administration. They think the explanation is inadequate, and they're worried about the effect it's having on the country's population. So this thing is being mishandled, I think, both substantively and politically.
So when you say it's dangerous, Mr. Ambassador, for the audience who might say to themselves reasonably, isn't this essentially 18th century technology? And aren't there far more dangerous things, intercontinental ballistic missiles, hypersonic jets, and satellites that are spying on America all the time? What makes this balloon situation, from your vantage point, so alarming?
Well, I would make the case precisely because it seems so unusual for a country with advanced technology like China to resort to balloons. So I asked the question, well, what is the payload of this Chinese balloon that's come all the way from Hainan, which contains numerous military bases? It's not a resort area. It's a heavily militarized island. And what exactly is the balloon's objective? Is it to try to see if they can penetrate our surveillance, that there are ways that are not what we're looking at most typically, like missiles, like jet airplanes, but some other way to get dangerous material into the United States? Is this possibly something that could be used to deliver a nuclear warhead? Could a balloon like this contain chemical or biological weapons that could be unleashed on the United States? What are exactly the motives here? So you're confronted with a balloon that doesn't identify itself. We think it came from China. I'm going to ask at my briefing this afternoon did the Defense Department contact China and say, one of your balloons is approaching Alaska.
Right.
If you have directional control, turn it around, or we're going to shoot it down.
And to that point about the possible weaponization of this, wouldn't that have argued against shooting it out of the sky over the continental U.S.?
I think it argues for shooting it out of the sky over the Bering Sea. Now, I understand that there's an argument that that we wanted to gather intelligence from it, and it's very typical in intelligence situations. There's a trade-off between learning what we can versus the risk of the other side's planned proceeding. Given the sensitivity of the possible purposes of the Chinese balloon, I would have shot it down first. But what we don't have an answer to, and what I plan to ask, is if we knew this balloon was coming from China and knew it a week before it approached Alaska, what effort was made to contact the Chinese and say, where's that balloon going and why is it up here?
Mr. Ambassador, let's talk politics today. Nikki Haley threw her hat in the Republican ring for president. There were those who were there, herself included, who compared her to Jeane Kirkpatrick and to Margaret Thatcher. Your reaction?
Jeane Kirkpatrick was Margaret Thatcher in the United States in the 1980s. But I will say, as Senator Lloyd Benson once said, updated a little bit, I knew Jeane Kirkpatrick, and Nikki Haley is no Jeane Kirkpatrick. I thought it was presumptuous. I think the case for Nikki Haley is weak. I think she's probably running for vice president. We'll see how she does.
Are you considering a run for president yourself, sir? And if so, why?
Well, I still am. I considered it very seriously in 2016, ultimately decided not to run. If I did it this year, it would be seriously, not to be a one-issue candidate. But I was very disturbed when Donald Trump said that the Constitution should be terminated so that he could be declared the winner of the 2020 election. That's like calling for the overthrow of the government. And I was also disappointed that not enough Republicans explicitly rejected the idea that you could terminate the Constitution and said that kind of thinking is unacceptable in the Republican Party. I think the party has work to do to correct the damage that Trump has done. And at some point, somebody is going to have to be outspoken that he is not a conservative and not a Republican. He is purely Trumpian.
And do you have a timeline, sir, for deciding yes or no on that bid?
I don't. I understand the question. I've been through this due diligence before. I know time is not unlimited, but this has been a very strange pattern in the development of this election. Some people I thought were going to run have not run. Others may come in. I would not want to clutter up the field and allow Trump a way through a cluttered field as he did in 2016. I'm very aware of that. I want to make a responsible decision here, and I'm still thinking about it. I don't have a precise timeline at this point.
John Bolton, thank you so much for your time.
Glad to be with you.
Question. What does a presidential announcement say about a candidate? We will take a look at some historic speeches and a bit more from Haley today. When we come back, you are streaming Red and Blue.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became this sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future? They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
Vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women.
What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done?
We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
I stand before you today to announce my candidacy for President of the United States of America.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am officially running for President of the United States.
Today I'm announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
Time and time again, we look back at the moments presidents launched their campaigns and sentiments expressed therein that would shape America for years to come. Of course, there are also announcements from failed candidates that are largely forgotten. We do not know how history will judge today, but we do know that Nikki Haley hopes her announcement will be remembered for years to come.
For a strong America, for a proud America, I am running for President of the United States of America. Our moment is now. Our mission is clear. Let's save our country and secure our future, and let's move forward together toward our destiny in a strong and proud America.
Haley said she does not believe in identity politics or glass ceilings, but she has a chance to break barriers. If she becomes the Republican nominee, she would be the first woman and first Asian American at the top of the GOP ticket. That does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You are streaming CBS News.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.